Hey team, welcome to week 6 of Lavaman training, almost halfway there. So the key workout for this coming week is a bike run bike. And the first time I saw this on my schedule, I was doing a schedule written by Dave Scott. And when I saw the bike at the end, I'm like, why in the world is there a bike at the end? And then when I did the workout, I understood that second bike ride is actually quite hard. And what I figured out was after the end of the workout, as I looked at the total amount of biking miles that I did, it really felt like in my body that I had done probably another 30%. And, a lot of that is because we do the bike ride and then we do the run. And so that run translates into tired legs, into fatigue, and then you hop back on the bike. And so let's say, for example, on this workout, you're doing a total of 40 miles of cycling. Well, that's going to feel like 60 miles of cycling. So you sort of get that benefit of what it feels to ride longer without actually spending the time riding longer. You also probably notice that you're pretty sore in your butt when you get back on the bike the second time. So give it a try. Other athletes that I've had that have done it have been surprised at how difficult it is. So overall, it's a great workout, definitely a little bit different. So there's 2 distances that are on the schedule, and then I'm going to list a third one that's a little bit easier. So the 2 that are listed starts with a 24-mile bike ride, a 5-mile run, and then followed up by an 8-mile bike ride. And many of you I know live in areas where you're not outside, and so you can translate that into time. And so by time, I would say, ride for an hour and 15 minutes, the first bike ride, and then run for 45 minutes, and then bike for 20 minutes. The second level, the harder level, is 30-mile bike ride, 6-mile run, followed by a 10-mile bike ride. So clearly, a much greater distance, especially cycling, than the overall Lavaman race. The run is, pretty much the same. So translating that into time, you could look at an hour and 30 on the bike, 60 minutes of running, and then 30 minutes of cycling for the second bike ride. If you're a faster runner and you're a runner, say 8-minute pace, 8:30 pace, then you could just you could convert that 6 miles into time. So maybe you run for 48 minutes or 50 minutes rather than an hour, and that's fine too. And so the third one that I want to add, like if you look at the first one in the 24-5-8, it just feels like it's too much of a workout. Then go ahead and bump that down to something like a 20-mile bike ride, a 4-mile run, and then just a 5-mile bike ride at the end of that. Time-wise, we're looking at maybe say an hour bike ride, 35 minutes of running, and then 15 minutes of cycling. So let's get into some specifics on each of the bike run bikes. So on the first bike, make the first half of your first bike ride, make that first half aerobic. So make it conversation pace, nice and moderate effort. And then the second half of that first bike ride, now you've got that warm-up in, so the second half of the first bike ride, go ahead and take that up and think about what your race pace is and try to really peg that race pace. And I want you to go just slightly harder, slightly faster than your projected race pace. So I really want you to tap into what that feels like. If you're on a bike, on a trainer, or outside, pay attention to what kind of gearing that is. If you're using a heart rate monitor, you can use that, a power meter. Tap into those metrics so that you can use those during the race, but especially really want you to know what it feels like. Okay, so that's where we get into what that race pace feels like. And again, if you've never done a race, you don't know because you haven't done a race, but these practices are opportunities. So when you're out there riding, just ask yourself, can I maintain this effort, for 25 miles? And if the answer is no, then back off a little bit. And if the answer is yes, I can easily, a lot of times you might find that you're riding too easy, especially if you're riding with a friend and you're talking. And if that's the case, then, just switch to one gear harder. Okay. So on the run, there's a couple choices. You may be pretty fatigued and you may need to do the whole thing at an aerobic pace, so a conversation pace, moderate effort. If that's not the case and you're able to pick it up, then what I want you to try doing is alternate between the odd numbers, so mile 1, 3, 5. That would be aerobic, so that would be a conversation pace. And then on the even miles, 2, 4, and 6, see if you can bump it up a little bit. So see if you can toggle between an aerobic effort and slightly harder, which would be more about a half marathon effort. definitely not a 10K pace effort. So and perceived exertion should be moderately hard. It should not be hard. So you should just see if you can just, you're running your first mile aerobically, see if you can bump it up a little bit in effort and then go back to an aerobic pace and then bump it up a little bit and go back and bump it up. Those little efforts, the reason for that is, especially like in Lavaman, about just before mile 2, you start going uphill, and that uphill is going to require more effort. It's going to get harder. It's going to require more effort to maintain the same pace. Otherwise, at the same effort, your pace is going to drop. And so doing a run like this where you go between aerobic and slightly harder and back to aerobic and slightly harder helps sort of mimic that, what's going to come up in a race where the course, the undulation changes, and it changes the effort load required of you. Right, so that's the reason for this run. Again, you may be pretty fatigued and you may need to do the whole thing aerobically, and that's totally fine. The second bike ride, like I said, when you get on there, your butt's going to be a little bit sore, so just be a bit warned. And you're also going to find that your legs are really pretty fatigued. So the first half of the second bike ride, you can think of it as more of an active recovery ride. So keep your cadence high and keep the pressure in your legs light, so be in an easier gear with a higher cadence. So this is not meant to be like a hard part of this first half of the second bike ride. Now, you may find that you need to just keep it at that recovery ride all the way through, and that's okay. But if you can, in the second half of this second bike ride, see if you can switch to what Dave Scott calls the time trial gear. I like to refer to as the gear of choice. Almost all of us have a gear that we naturally settle into, and that's not always just one gear. If you're going, that gear can change based on the terrain. If the road is going slightly up, you might be in a different gear than slightly going down. But if you notice that you ride, you'll tend to find this gear of choice, or what Dave calls the time trial gear. This is the gear that you'll race in. And so when you're out on the second half of this bike ride, find that gear. And I want you to bring the effort up a little bit, bring it back to an aerobic. So from an active recovery, it's going to get a little bit harder to an aerobic. If you're feeling great and you want to bump it up to a moderately hard effort, you can do that too. But get into that gear of choice, that time trial gear, and keep that cadence going. Get that cadence up to 90 in this. In the first half of this second bike ride, you should try to get the cadence above 90, but it should be quite easy because you have less resistance on the pedals by choosing an easier gear. On the second half, I want you to try to keep it above 90, but you'll have that tension on the pedals and you'll have that muscular challenge rather than an easy free spin that we're going for in the first half. Okay, so that's the second part of the second bike ride. You'll be happy when this workout's done, trust me, but it will make you more prepared for race day. The second key workouts, just like I talked about last week, Monday through Thursday, there's high intensity workouts in there. Again, you have to assess where you are personally. If you need more active recovery just on Tuesday, then you can make that ride an active recovery workout. You can also switch things around, if you want to move Tuesday's workout to Monday so that Monday's, was a swim and you want to swim on Tuesday and that gives you a little bit more of recovery, you can do that too. Okay, so Monday through Thursday, I've talked about it numerous times about how you can change that to make it easier or harder. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to answer it. So those are the workouts. We're getting into definitely this week and the week after are some of the harder workouts. So this is kind of the meat of the schedule. So this is where you really want to focus and definitely make sure you get in these key workouts. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. Have a great week.